The newspaper clipping had yellowed at the edges, its corners soft from years of careful handling. Marcus held it between trembling fingers, reading the same headline for the 1,000th time. Local woman saves family from fire, 10 in hospital. Below it, a grainy photograph showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. No name, just unidentified Good Samaritan. For 15 years, she had been nameless in his mind. The woman who had pulled him, his sister and their grandmother, from their burning apartment building when he was only 8 years old. The woman who had inhaled too much smoke, who had collapsed on the sidewalk after making sure they were safe, who had died 3 days later without ever waking up. The woman who had given everything so that strangers could live. Marcus had spent half his life trying to find out who she was. Now, at 23, working as a junior reporter for the Chicago Tribune, he finally had a lead. The call had come on a Tuesday, morning that started like any other. Mrs. Chen, from the newsroom's tip line, had transferred a woman who claimed to have information about an old fire on Ashland Avenue. Marcus almost dismissed it. Cold cases weren't his beat, and he had a city council meeting to cover that afternoon. But something in the caller's voice, a tremor of grief mixed with hope, made him pause. "My daughter," the woman had said, her words thick with an accent Marcus couldn't quite place. "My Elena. She never came home that night 15 years ago. I saw the newspaper. The picture. It looked like her, but they never told us anything. Said they couldn't identify the body." Marcus's heart had stopped. Elena, finally, a name. Now he stood outside a small house in Pilsen, his notebook tucked in his jacket pocket, his palms sweating despite the October chill. The woman who answered the door was perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, and eyes that held the particular sadness of a mother who had lost her child. "You're the reporter?" she asked, her English careful and precise. "Yes, ma'am. Marcus Rivera. Thank you for calling." She stepped aside to let him in. The living room was small but immaculately clean, filled with the scent of café con leche and fresh bread. Photographs covered every surface: graduations, birthdays, family gatherings, and in the center of the mantelpiece, a larger photo of a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes that Marcus recognized immediately. "Elena Vasquez," the woman said, following his gaze. "My daughter. She was 26 when she couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus sat heavily in the chair she offered him, staring at the photograph. The same face from the newspaper clipping. But here she was alive, laughing, her arm around an elderly woman in a wheelchair. "That's my mother," Mrs. Vasquez explained. "Elena's grandmother. She had Alzheimer's. Elena took care of her every day after work. She was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital." Of course she was a nurse, Marcus thought. It made perfect sense. "Tell me about that night," he said gently. Mrs. Vasquez's hands twisted in her lap. Elena worked the evening shift. She should have been home by midnight, but she never came. We called the hospital, called the police. They said there had been an accident, a fire, but no one could tell us anything. The next day, we saw the newspaper, but they wouldn't let us see. They said the body was too badly burned for identification. We had no money for lawyers, no connections. We were just invisible people to them." Marcus felt a familiar anger rise in his chest. He had seen it too many times. How the system failed people like Mrs. Vasquez, people who didn't speak perfect English, who didn't know how to navigate bureaucracy, who couldn't demand answers. "Did Elena usually walk home that route?" "No," Mrs. Vasquez shook her head. "She took the bus. But that night, maybe the bus was late, maybe she decided to walk. I don't know. I've wondered every day for 15 years. Over the next several hours, Mrs. Vasquez painted a picture of her daughter that made Marcus's chest tight with admiration and grief. Elena had worked double shifts to pay for her grandmother's medications. She had sent money to cousins in El Salvador after an earthquake. She had volunteered at a homeless shelter on her days off. She had been saving up to go back to school, to become a nurse practitioner so she could open a clinic in her neighborhood. "She always said she wanted to help people," Mrs. Vasquez whispered. Even as a little girl, she would bring home stray cats, injured birds. She couldn't stand to see anyone or anything suffering. Marcus thought of his own memories of that night, hazy and dreamlike, filtered through the terror and confusion of a child. He remembered strong arms lifting him, a woman's voice telling him everything would be okay. He remembered the smell of smoke and the feeling of being carried to safety, but mostly, he remembered the sense that someone had chosen to save him, had decided his life was worth risking everything for. "I need to ask you something," he said carefully. "Would you be willing to go on the record? To let me write her story?" Mrs. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, staring at her daughter's photograph. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "For 15 years, I've prayed that someone would remember her, that someone would say her name." "Yes," she nodded firmly. "Yes, write about my Elena. Let the world know who she was." Marcus spent the next week diving deep into Elena's story. He tracked down her co-workers at the hospital, who remembered her as the nurse who stayed late to hold scared patients' hands, who brought homemade soup for colleagues who were struggling, who never missed a shift even when she was sick herself. He found the homeless shelter where she volunteered, where they still had a memorial plaque with her picture that someone had put up after she disappeared. He also dug into the official records of the fire. What he found made him furious. The fire department had Elena's purse, found near the scene with her ID intact. But somehow, it had been misfiled, lost in bureaucratic shuffle. For 15 years, a family had grieved without answers while their daughter's identification sat in an evidence box in a basement. But the most powerful part of Marcus's investigation came when he reached out to other survivors of the fire. His own grandmother had passed away 2 years earlier, and his sister lived in California now, but there had been other families in the building that night. Mrs. Johnson, who had lived on the 3rd floor, remembered everything. "A woman came to my door, banging and shouting for everyone to get out," she told Marcus over the phone. "She helped me get my baby and my elderly mother down the stairs. When we got outside, she looked up at the building and said, 'There's someone else up there.' We tried to stop her, told her the fire department was coming, but she ran back inside. We never saw her come out." Mr. Patterson from the 2nd floor had a similar story. "She saved my life, no question about it. I had fallen asleep with a cigarette. I'm not proud of that, and the smoke alarm woke me up, but I was so disoriented. This woman appeared at my door like an angel, helped me to the stairs. I was coughing so hard I could barely walk, but she half carried me down. Then she went back up for others." As Marcus pieced together the timeline, a clear picture emerged. Elena had been walking home from her shift at the hospital when she saw the fire. Instead of calling 911 and moving on, she had run toward the danger. She had gone door to door through a burning building, alerting residents and helping them escape. She had made multiple trips up and down those stairs, each one more dangerous than the last as the fire spread. She had only collapsed after the last person was safe. The fire chief from that night, now retired, confirmed what Marcus had suspected. "She saved at least 12 people that night," he said. "If she hadn't acted when she did, if she had waited for us to arrive, well, we would have been pulling out a lot more body bags." Marcus sat in his car outside the fire station after that interview, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Elena had done. She had seen strangers in danger and had decided in an instant that their lives were worth more than her own safety. She had died a hero, and her family had never known. The story ran on a Sunday, taking up the entire front page with Elena's photograph, not the grainy newspaper shot, but a beautiful portrait her mother had provided, showing Elena in her nurse's scrubs smiling radiantly. The headline read, "Elena Vasquez, the hero who saved 12. Lives and never got the recognition she deserved." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Tribune's phones rang nonstop. People came forward with donations for a memorial scholarship in Elena's name. The mayor announced that the street where the fire had occurred would be renamed Elena Vasquez Way. The hospital where she worked dedicated their new pediatric wing to her memory. But the moment that meant the most to Marcus came 3 days after the story published. He was at his desk when the receptionist called to say someone was there to see him. When he walked to the lobby, he found Mrs. Vasquez standing there with tears in her eyes, holding a copy of the newspaper. "Mijo," she said, using the endearment that meant my son, "you gave me my daughter back. For 15 years, she was just gone. Now she's Elena again. She's remembered." They hugged in the middle of the busy newsroom, both of them crying, both of them understanding that sometimes the most important stories are the ones about ordinary people who do extraordinary things when no one is watching. 6 months later, Marcus stood before a crowd of hundreds at the dedication ceremony for Elena Vasquez. Memorial Park, built on the lot where the old apartment building had been. Mrs. Vasquez had asked him to speak, and as he looked out at the faces gathered there, survivors of the fire, Elena's co-workers, neighbors who had been touched by her story, he understood something profound about the ripple effects of kindness. Elena Vasquez had died saving strangers, never knowing their names or stories. But her sacrifice had echoed through the years, inspiring others to acts of service and compassion. Marcus himself had become a journalist, partly because of her example, driven to tell the stories of people who might otherwise be forgotten. As he began to speak, Marcus's voice was strong and clear. Today, we remember Elena Vasquez, a woman whose name the world should have known 15 years ago. A nurse, a daughter, a hero who ran toward danger when others ran away. She reminds us that the most powerful force in human experience isn't fame or fortune or recognition. It's the simple decision to put someone else's life before your own. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word.